Okay, Bezat Hashem, today in Masechet Shabbat, we're going to start halfway down Lamed Zayin Amud Bet. Amar Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda, Amar Rav Yochanan. That's where we're starting. We're going to have today, Bezat Hashem, 3 sections if we could get to the last part, which I don't know if we will. But we're going to first continue to discuss these shitot of Chananya and the Chachamim as it applies to metztamek v'yafelo, metztamek v'ralo. The second section, which will start the bottom of Lamed Zayin Amud Bet, we're going to talk about what if he forgot, meaning by accident he forgot the food on the fire. Shalom, shalom. So in such a scenario that he forgot the food on the fire, we're going to discuss, is that different perhaps that he did shehiya, but it was b'shogeg? So we'll see. And if we get to the bottom of Lamed Chet Amud Aleph, we'll speak about what if he did the shehiya b'isur, without gufal ketuma, b'mezid. So we'll get into that. It's a very interesting question as well. So Bezat Hashem, David, how are you?
Good.
Good. Bezat Hashem, good to have you back. We're holding the middle of Lamed Zayin Amud Bet. That's what we're holding here. Lamed Zayin Amud Bet. Amar Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda, Amar Rav Yochanan. Okay, before we even start, I want to do a quick recap because we're mamish in the middle of a sugya with a lot of factors here. So just kedai to remember where we're holding. We have here a basic machloket, Chananya v'Chachamim. This is the basic machloket. What's the basic machloket?
The shehiya.
Shehiya, to leave food on the fire before Shabbat. According to Chananya, it's mutar without gufal ketuma, as long as it's ma'achal ben drusai. Which means, as long as the food was partially cooked. A third, half, partially cooked. You don't need gufal ketuma. Chachamim say, no, that would need gufal ketuma. But what would not need gufal ketuma? If it was completely cooked. Now, in the shita of the Chachamim, we have 2 options. When we say mevushal kol tzorko, there's metztamek v'ralo and metztamek v'yafelo. What is the difference? Some foods, even though they're fully cooked, like a cholent, if you let it cook more, it gets better. Like chamin, cholent, certain things, as it cooks more, it gets better. So we had 2 shitot yesterday. Essentially, the first daya of Rabbi Yochanan, Rabba bar bar Chana Am Rabbi Yochanan, we said it could be he holds metztamek v'yafelo would be asur. That's what we actually said. The only reason it was mutar is because he tried to do the ketuma, it just, the fire broke through, kitzur. But the other way to look at it would be to say perhaps even metztamek v'yafelo would be mutar because it's already fully cooked. There's 2 ways to look at that. So now we're picking up actually with the third memra of Rabbi Yochanan. If you remember, we said the first memra of Rabbi Yochanan, which was Rabba bar bar Chana Am Rabbi Yochanan, held like the Chachamim. The second one, Rabbi Yochanan, which was Rav Sheshet Am Rabbi Yochanan, held like Chananya. And the third one's going to go back to holding like the Chachamim. Amar Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Kirashe sikua begefet uveitzim, if you have an oven, a double stove that was heated up with gefet or eitzim. Again, these are materials, pulp, or the items that come from it, which are mosif havel, which require gufal ketuma because of that. Means these are not light heat. These are heavy heat, or it becomes cold. However you look at it, there is an issue of you need a gufal ketuma. So in this case, kirashe sikua begefet uveitzim. Now, you could leave food on it from Erev Shabbat if it was water that was fully hot or food that was fully cooked. Now here he's meforash, he says, Ve'afilu metztamek v'yafelo. Even if it's food that improves as it continues to stew. So this is mefurish. This daya of Rabbi Yochanan holds, like the Chachamim, you can leave fully cooked foods, not a problem, even without gufal ketuma. And even if those foods are metztamek v'yafelo. So now what comes out, we have proven, there is a shita we've just shown that holds the Chachamim, who hold you could leave fully cooked foods on the stovetop, shehiya without gufal ketuma, even metztamek v'yafelo. So now we have a daya that exists like this. We haven't proven that yet. Now we have a daya like this. So one of the rabbis said to Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda, again it was Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda quoting Rabbi Yochanan. So one of the rabbis said to Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda, Rav v'Shmuel da'amri tarvayu. What we know Rav and Shmuel both say, metztamek ve'afelo asur, that you could only leave foods that are fully cooked, like the Chachamim, without gufa uktuma, if it's metztamek ve'ralo. But metztamek ve'afelo, Rav v'Shmuel say asur. So how can you say mutar? So Amar le, so Shmuel Yehuda said, "Etu let ana yada." Do you think I don't know that? I know that there's another day. I know Rav and Shmuel are cholek. Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. I know it was said in the name of Shmuel. Metztamek ve'afelo asur. I understand that Rav and Shmuel are of the opinion, if it's metztamek ve'afelo, it's asur to leave on the fire without gufa uktuma. Rav and Shmuel, right. But ki ka'amina lecha, what am I telling you? Rabbi Yochanan ka'amina. I'm saying Rabbi Yochanan is cholek. So now what comes out is, we have now shitot, we could put names on. We have Rabbi Yochanan, which is actually the third opinion quoting Rabbi Yochanan, really, which is Shmuel Bar Yehuda. No, the third one. The first one, that was... Exactly.
And now Rabbi Yochanan by himself.
Well, actually, it's Shmuel Bar Yehuda. Quoting Rabbi Yochanan, he says,
"Mutar.
Afilu metztamek ve'afelo mutar."
Mutar metztamek ve'lo lo garuf lo katum.
Ve'afelo mutar. And Rav.
Mutar hashaya lo garuf lo katum.
B'diuk. Asur. So this comes out now. We have Amoraim to put names on. Again, remember, the Chachamim hold that in order to do shehiya, if it's not fully cooked, the Chachamim, remember, let's not forget the main thing. Let's not forget the main thing. 1 second, Yochai, 1 second. Chananya holds if it's ben drusai, you don't need gufa uktuma. Chachamim hold if it's ben drusai, it's just partially cooked, you do need gufa uktuma.
But kol
tzorko, you don't need gufa uktuma. But kol tzorko, when does it not need gufa uktuma? So kulei alma modi, everyone agrees if it's veralo, metztamek veralo, you don't need gufa uktuma. But if it's mevushal kol tzorko and it's metztamek ve'afelo, machloket amoraim. According to Rabbi Yochanan, even that is mutar. According to Rav and Shmuel, that is asur. And again, remember, what's the logic? Because maybe shemi chateh. As long as there's some benefit that could still be received, so shemi chateh.
It's already fully cooked.
So listen.
How I try to rush the process.
It's not rush. It's you could assist perhaps. As long as it could receive some benefit, so you might try to stir the coals. Maybe that would be avara and Shabbat.
But I don't need to stir the coals.
You don't need to, it's true.
I don't need to rush the process here. It's already, what benefit do I have here?
But so long as there is some benefit to be received, there's a chashash you might, according to Rav and Shmuel. According to Rabbi Yochanan, the third day, we're not worried.
רגע, אבל שמא יחטא זה דאורייתא או גזרה?
גזרה דרבנן.
אז איך גזרה על גזרה?
It's a גזרה, שמא יעשה איסור דאורייתא. Because...
אבל יש פה גזרה לגזרה.
Why is it גזרה לגזרה? שמא יחטא זה דרבנן.
מצטמק ויפה לו. לא. מבושל כל צורכו.
It's all included. שמא יחטא means you might do an איסור דאורייתא, which is הברה.
אבל זה גזרה לא לשים מבושל כל צורכו. on קירה שסיכוע בגפן ועצים, okay, this is one גזרה. Okay, and there is another גזרה.
זה נכלל, meaning it's all included. If we hold,
it's hard for me to
we'll go over it after.
Accept it.
I want to finish this point and then we'll go over the points just to get all the shitot clear. So let's go a little bit ahead here. Gemara says like this. Let's just finish the point. Amar le. Fine. Amar le Rav Ukva Mishan Rav Ashi. Ukva from Mishan, which was a place near Bavel, he said to Rav Ashi, Atu demekarvitu le Rav Shmuel, you live in Mishan. Slicha.
Okay, you're in the right place.
Amar le Rav Ukva Mishan Rav Ashi. Atu demekarvitu le Rav Shmuel, avditu ki Rav Shmuel. You, Rav Ashi, who live near Rav and Shmuel, so you should do like Rav and Shmuel, meaning if it's metztamek ve'afelo, you shouldn't put that on the kira before Shabbat. Anan, but we, Rav Ukva's talking, Anan na'avid ki Rabbi Yochanan. But we will do like Rabbi Yochanan.
That's in Eretz Yisrael?
Yeah, meaning we're going to follow. Now, it's interesting. I don't know if he was dafka in Eretz Yisrael, but he was saying, I'm not near Rav and Shmuel's place. Memela, I don't have to follow their chumrah. I'm going to follow Rabbi Yochanan, so as to say it's mutar when it comes to metztamek v'yafelo. Okay, so let's just recap now briefly what we have, because really we're going to move on now to another question. Nogea, but let's move on to another question now. Turn this off. He's coming. So what comes out is like this. Let's just recap very quickly here. We have here. So we have here a basic machloket Chananya and Chachamim. Okay? Chachamim, which is, if it's only partially cooked, are you allowed to leave it shehiya on the kira, or do you need gufa uktuma?
There's two machlokot here. Garu vekatum, lo garu vekatum.
Yeah.
And ben rosai and kol
So
tzorko, no?
there's two, but they're really one. You
So
understand?
they both actually...
Meaning, let me just point out like this. If it's ben dosai,
And kol tzorko, lo tzork garu vekatum.
ben dosai. If you have food that's ben dosai, according to Chananya, you don't need gufa uktuma. You do shehiya before
According to
Shabbat.
Chachamim, you do.
You do. Okay, that's the machloket. Really, that's the nekuda of machloket.
And then kol tzorko.
What's that? Okay, so kol tzorko should be mutar according to the Chachamim. But then within the Chachamim we have a debate, which is even if it's kol tzorko, but it benefits as it stews more on the fire, which is metztamek v'ralo, metztamek v'yafelo.
זה רבי שמואל
It's machloket amoraim. Rav Shmuel say it's asur to put it on the fire. Rabbi Yochanan, according to the third day of, Rabbi Yochanan says it's mutar.
So why they said why you don't know Rabbi Yochanan De'ah? Why they ask him that? Yeah, we do.
No, he was saying there is a shita who exists that says asur. Rabbi Shmuel, so he said, yeah, but I wasn't paskening like that shita.
But what's the difference between
they can pasken against Rabbi Yochanan?
What?
They can pasken against Rabbi Yochanan.
Who?
Rabbi Shmuel.
Yeah, that's machloket amoraim. They are both amoraim. Yeah, amoraim, no problem.
Okay, so they say we know we heard about Rabbi Yochanan De'ah, but we don't hold him like that.
Let's
But
continue.
what's the difference with Rav Sheshen and this De'ah? The only difference, Rav Sheshen say, lo
completely different.
tzorko.
Completely different.
Lama?
Rav Sheshet was quoting Rabbi Yochanan as holding like Chananya. This is
Rav
completely different
Bring it
shita.
from the negative side. Lo kol
Rav
tzorko, lo kol ze.
Sheshet was saying Rabbi Yochanan holds like Chananya. That's completely, and this, which is Rabbi Shmuel by Yehuda, Rabbi Yochanan, says like Chachamim. So clearly there was different versions floating around of what Rabbi Yochanan really held. I want to point that out. Very interesting thing is there were
maybe
different...
it depends by the food.
It's not totally on the food. What we're pointing there were different dayot in what Rabbi Yochanan even held himself. So this, but we're gonna just the last dayot we're coming out is. It's a very that's bichlal a question. Very often we find that is there was a trei Chananya liba de Rabbi Meir. What happened? Rabbi Meir said something, so there was some bilbul at some point. We don't know exactly, but and we say luvelu divrei Elokim chayim. It's a whole discussion. But the point is that.
But could be that Rabbi Yochanan changed his mind also.
Could be changed mind. Sometimes we might say that.
But maybe the Morah that quote Rabbi Yochanan heard one thing, like we learned it before in different marot. He heard one thing and he applied for a different thing.
It could be.
We did it like...
but meaning, unless the Gemara speaks that out, we're going to assume there's just different versions of what he said. Sometimes the Gemara will go through that. He says this, he says this.
So
okay.
we're looking on it from different angles, basically.
But the bottom line, this is what is important to remember, is we have the machloket Chananya v'Chachamim. It's machal ben drusai, do you need gufa uktuma? And even in the Chachamim who say if it's mevushal kol tzorko, we have different dayot in the Amoraim if that's also applicable to metztamek v'yafelo or not. Or is it just metztamek v'ralo? That's really what comes out. Good, important to know. Let's continue. Now, says the Gemara a question. Amar le Abai le Rav Yosef. Abai turned to Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef was the Rebbe of Abai. So Abai said to Rav Yosef, and he said, Mahu lishhot. Now this question is so unclear what he's asking. Mahu lishtot. What does it mean? Literally it means,
Ashaya.
Can you do shehiya? We had also just discussing this. Could you do shehiya with gufa? What's the question here? So Tosfot explains that this is one of two ways you could learn the question. Okay? Either his question is, do we paskin like Chananya, or do we paskin like Chachamim? Meaning, if you have food that's ma'achal ben dosai, and you want to put it on the fire before Shabbat, do you need gufa uktuma like the Chachamim, or do you not, like Chananya? That was the question. Simple. Who do we paskin like? Can you do shehiya or not? Or the question was, we paskin like the Chachamim. The question is, as the Tosfot says, the second pshat, is that when it's fully cooked, it's metztamek ve'yafelo mutar, is it asur? Really, he was asking, what's the psak halacha? Now, which halacha he was asking? Either do we paskin like Chananya or Chachamim, or we do paskin like Chachamim, but is metztamek ve'yafelo mutar or asur? That's two ways to understand the question. Okay. So Amar Leis, Rav Yosef said back, Rav Yehuda, we know Rav Yehuda, the Amora, Rav Yehuda, Mashehule, they would do shehiya on food without gufa ktuma, v'achil, and you would eat it. So it would appear, again, either way you ask the question, either that means we paskin like Chananya, or it means metztamek ve'yafelo is mutar. Either way you learn the question, shehiya is mutar. Okay? That's it. So Amar Lei, Abaye turned back to Rav Yosef and he said, Bar minei Rav Yehuda. Besides Rav Yehuda, don't bring a proof from Rav Yehuda. Why can't you bring a proof from Rav Yehuda? The Kiva de Misukanu, Rashi says at the end of Rav Yehuda's life, the Amora, he was sick. Rashi says he was sickly, so therefore for him he was Misukan on Shabbat. Afilu b'Shabbat nami shari leme'abed lei. You'd even be allowed to cook for him on Shabbat. Exactly. So to say they did shehiya and gave it to him, of course they did that, because even to cook mamash for him on Shabbat would be mutar. So you can't bring a proof from there what's mutar asur for shehiya, because he's pikuach nefesh. So leave it lachmais. Abai said, but that's what I was asking for me and you, for healthy people. Is shehiya mutar or shehiya asur? That's the question I'm really asking you. So Amalei Rav Yosef said back, Bisura Mashahu, in Surah, which was a place, they used to do shehiya. Again, either they paskin like Chananya, or they held metztamek ve'yafelo as mutar. How do I know? The Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Mare de Uvda. Rashi says Mare de Uvda means medakdek b'ma'asav. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak was very careful with his actions, and Hava, he was very makbid on his actions. Umashu v'achil, and they would do shehiya and he would eat it. So we see, again, either we paskin like Chananya, or we paskin like Chachamim, metztamek ve'yafelo is mutar. That's what Rav Yosef said back. Beautiful. Amar Rav Ashi, ka'imna kamedo Avuna. So Rav Ashi related a story. He said, I was standing in front of Rav Huna, and it was on Shabbat. V'shahin le kosa daharsana ve'achal. They had put before Shabbat on the fire kosa daharsana. Rashi says kosa daharsana is a cup of fish hash, it's called in English. Mazeh is they take pieces of the fish, they cut it up with oil, they cook it.
Herring.
I don't know if it's herring, it could be as cooked. Rashi says, Dagim hamivushalim b'shamnan b'kemach. It sounds a little bit like fried fish to me, a little bit like oil and fish innards and whatever. Makes so they did shehiya with this before. Dag. Yeah, they did shehiya with it before Shabbat. And v'achal, and this Rav Huna ate it. So he said they ate it. V'lo yadanas, I don't know, why did he eat it? Mishum de kasavar metztamek ve'yafelo mutar. Either he held metztamek ve'yafelo is mutar. That's why you were allowed to leave it and eat it on Shabbat. Mishum de kivan de it be'mecha, or it might be, since there's flour, mecha is flour, in this dish, metztamek ve'ralohu, so if there's flour, flour, I guess it dries out, it doesn't benefit as it sits on the fire after it was fully cooked. I don't know why he was allowed to eat it. Now, the Gemara wraps up this section and tells us the rule. Now, this rule we're about to state, really which follows what we just said, seems to go with the shita of the Chachamim, which means if it's not fully cooked, you're not allowed to do shehiya without gufa ktuma. So Amar Rav Nachman says the following: metztamek ve'yafelo asur, metztamek ve'ralo mutar. Again, this is in the shita of the Chachamim. It's fully cooked. If you don't have gufa ktuma before Shabbat, if it's going to be a food that improves as it sits on the heat, asur. If it's going to be a food that doesn't improve, ve'ralo mutar. This is not like Chananya. So Rav Nachman seems to be following the shita of Chachamim. Klala de milta, and this is the rule of the matter. Kol de itbe mecha. So now we're going to talk about particular foods. If there's flour in the dish, you have a fully cooked dish. If there's flour, kemach, inside, metztamek ve'ralo. Leaving it to be on the heat for longer is considered metztamek ve'ralo. So you don't need gufa too much. Mutar. Lebar mitavshil de lifta. Besides for a dish that has lifta in it. Lifta is lefet, which is turnip in English. It's sharp. Sharp. You know turnip? You know what it is?
Yes.
Is that called lefet?
Gets better.
Modern Hebrew?
Lefet.
So, besides for, let's get this clear. So, lebar mitavshil de lifta. That even if there's flour in this turnip dish, metztamek v'yafelohu, it's considered that it improves. Meaning, is the dish with lifta, even with flour, is metztamek v'yafelo. But what?
It's very hard, and it's as long as it sits more and more and more, it gets a little bit more and more soft.
So the Gemara says v'hani mili, but that's only true. It's metztamek v'yafelo di'itbe bisra. Rashi says an interesting logic here. If you have basar with the lefet in that dish, the shamnunit, the fat of the meat, it tempers the sharpness of the turnip, meaning it sweetens the sharpness of the turnip. So then cooking longer is metztamek v'yafelo. Avelet bisra. But if you have the lefet dish without meat, metztamek v'ralohu. The more it cooks, it's actually metztamek v'ralo. It's like a cookbook over here. You hear? And in Gemara says last step, v'chi'it bisra nami lo amaran. And it's only, even if there is meat, it's only metztamek v'yafelo. This is very interesting nekuda. Ela de lo kabay lelo ochin. As long as you don't need it for guests. Now, why is that? Because if you don't need it for guests, so then as it improves, meaning it sits on the fire, it actually improves. What's the pshat if you have it for guests, so then it's considered a bad thing? Aval kabay lalo ochin, if you want it for guests, metztamek v'ralo, it's considered metztamek v'ralo. Why? What's the difference? Because if you have meat, like we said, on the stove, so generally as it continues to simmer, it gets better. Now it shrinks in size, but it gets better. But shrinking in size is not good if you have guests, because you want to serve the guests pieces that are big. So therefore, if you have guests, so then it's not considered metztamek v'yafelo anymore, it's considered metztamek v'ralo.
Can you explain it?
Sure. We're saying is when there's meat, we're saying like this, when there's meat in this dish, metztamek v'yafelo. Why? Because as it cooks,
meat in general in tafshil is always,
it's a good thing. What we're saying is that's only if you're not having guests. Because if you're having guests, the more it evaporates and shrinks, you don't want to give your guests small pieces. You want to give them chatichot chashuvot, big pieces. So therefore, actually, it becomes metztamek v'ralo at that point, which is a fascinating...
Although it's not metztamek v'ralo, but it become good, but the look is ralo.
But you hear that? It comes at very interesting nekuda. It's not only in the taste that is a chiluk of metztamek v'yafelo. It's even practical what you want to use it for. I want to use it for guests, and therefore for bigger pieces is more chashuv. So it comes out as it's metztamek v'yafelo v'ralo is not only in the tima, in the taste of it, it's even what you want to use it for. You hear the chiluk, meaning that would also create a difference. For guests, you want bigger pieces, and therefore it's metztamek v'ralo if it cooks more.
There is any halacha here that there is no chiluk?
Yeah, it's just interesting. Very interesting when it comes out like that. Okay, let's finish up. Lifta, daisa, v'tamri. Lifta is figs, teinim. Daisa is like oatmeal or cereal. V'tamri or dates.
Daisa is what? Oatmeal?
Daisa is like oatmeal or cereal.
Yeah, cereal.
Yeah. V'tamri or dates. Tmarim. Metztamek v'ralahen. Those things, if they're fully cooked, as it cooks more, it's considered metztamek v'ralahen.
הבריאות. מה זה ליפטה?
Lifta is figs, teinim. Tafshil shel teinim, exactly. So those things are metztamek v'ralahen, that is the yesod. Alright, moving on to another section now. But b'kitzu, this was all lefi Chachamim. According to Chananya, this doesn't even start, because according to Chananya, you don't even need it to be fully cooked. It just has to be ma'achal ben drusai, and that's already enough to leave it without Garuf Katum. However, it's important to mention Rashi and Tosfot both say, which we mentioned yesterday, that we paskin like Chananya, and the source seems to be based on the Mishnah Yetet Amud Bet that we said that it has to be Karum Panea, which is considered already Ben Dosai. That would be sufficient.
But what about metztamek v'yafelo according to Chananya? It's not even applied just because ma'achal ben dosai?
Exactly, that doesn't seem to be a factor. Because the whole introduction of metztamek v'yafelo is it's fully cooked. You need it to be fully cooked. Oh, but still, maybe there's a problem that it stews more.
Let's say a person ate a steak.
I'm saying, but lefi Chananya, you don't even go there. Lefi Chananya, as long as it's ma'achal ben drusai, which is much less cooked, you can leave it on the fire.
Let's say it's a medium rare already, the meat. According to Chananya, you're good to go.
I don't know if that's the get there, but it might be the get there. It could be. We have to know exactly what's the get there.
Ben dosai is rare.
Yeah.
אבל ben dosai, it said, almost maybe חצי בישול as a medium rare.
Yeah.
medium rare זה חצי בישול.
כן.
Because medium already it's cooked really. Medium, if you ask medium,
זה עשוי, לא עשוי היטב.
it's cooked.
זה האדום, זה האדום.
לא, medium זה כבר...
אני באמת, בכל החיים שלי, אני לא הבנתי אנשים שאוהבים את זה rare. I don't understand the...
כי זה יותר רך.
My standing is rare
It's
too,
softer?
אני לא יודע.
It's softer when it's rare?
אבל זה לא, זה חי זה אחי.
No, it depends by the meat.
It's not healthy.
This is not for me.
יושב פה אדם שעובד בשר, יגיד לכם.
It's really depend the quality of the steak. If you have a good piece of meat,
medium rare, medium.
It's medium. It's
better.
Yeah, it's
I used to work with
if you have a good quality, but it's not good quality meat, you better cook it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can chew it.
Interesting. I'm not a fancy person, I guess that's why.
I eat only pita loca, don't get me wrong. I don't go spend $60, $80, $100 for that. I go to pizza. I spend money for pizza and I eat in pita loca. I don't go to the restaurant. Seriously, I go only to pizza. Sometimes toast. I'm not a restaurant guy. Honestly, I'm not enjoying to go to a restaurant.
My father, when he ordered pizza, he said make it well down, like crispy.
יאללה, חבר'ה, let's go.
יאללה, ממשיכים. באו מינה.
זכות רבי מאיר, it's your sides today. דיברנו על זה.
רבי יהודה בר אילאי.
I saw that somewhere. I wasn't sure if it was true or not.
Yeah, I read it also.
Because if it's true, it's very interesting. They were two of the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's true, but אני ראיתי
וגם רבי שמעון.
No, but he wasn't the same thing. It was later.
From the same group.
But the 5 students of Rabbi Akiva, after all the students died, 2 of them were Rabbi Yehuda bar Rabbi Elai and Rabbi Meir. So apparently, today is Rabbi Meir's yortzeit. Apparently, it's also Rabbi Yehuda bar Rabbi Elai's yortzeit, which would be a chidush because I mean.
ויש להם פה מחלוקת בזה. In the same thing of
Rabbi Yehuda bar Rabbi Meir, they argue about it. Very interesting. Very interesting. We spoke about yesterday. Anyways, let's continue. We got to go ahead, Chaver. Let's go. Okay, so now we're going to talk about a situation of shikha. Meaning what happened? But shikha, we forget stuff sometimes. So what happens like this? So what happens is like this. We're coming out over here, according to the Chachamim, if it's not completely cooked, you need gufa ktuma. According to Chananya, if it's machal ben drusai, but if it's not machal ben drusai, you do need gufa ktuma. Okay, so now the question is, this is the question now. What happens if he forgot? He put food on the fire Erev Shabbat. Now he didn't mean to leave it on shehiya into Shabbat, but he forgot.
Maybe it's the same idea like the
Shabbat?
Warm it or to cook it, whatever his intention was. It was not to leave it on Shabbat.
And
same thing like the katum.
So now he left it on Shabbat. So he did shehiya with food that requires gufa ktuma. So Rashi learns this is a question in the Chachamim. Tosfot learns it's a question in both of them. Meaning you could learn it's a question in both. According to the Chachamim, it was only machal ben drusai. According to Chananya, it was not even machal ben drusai. Either way, it was a situation that needed gufa ktuma, and he forgot he didn't do gufa ktuma.
It depends. It's the same thing like the katum. If you put the ashes on it.
No, he forgot.
I'm just saying.
Is it mutar or aso?
Yeah, but let's say it's reheat.
To eat it.
We had the same class before.
That's the question. Yeah.
כן,
בטח זה כמו ההוא ששמת את האפר על הזה, זה התחמם בטש.
לא.
הוא לא היה לו כוונה.
לא, פה הוא עשה מעשה לנסות לחזות, וזה נדלק מאליו באמצע שבת.
לא.
פה הוא שם את זה.
Yeah, no, this is a different case.
פה הוא שכח, לא היה לו כוונה.
מותר לו לאכול את זה. מותר לו.
Let's see.
מותר לו לאכול גם פה.
זה מזיד, בשוגג.
It was a mistake. Let's see. So says the Gemara, let's see. But you understand, Tosfot learns it could be in either shita. Ba'o minei Rechiya bar Abba. Amichet Amud Aleph. They asked Rechiya bar Abba the following question. Shachach tera al gabe kira. So he forgot the pot on top of the kira. There wasn't gufa ktuma, and he forgot the food on top of the double stove. Ubishla b'Shabbat mahu, and then it continued to cook onto Shabbat. So essentially, what he did was shehiya that needs gufa ktuma, but he didn't do gufa ktuma because he forgot. Again, Tosfot learned it's a question in both shitot.
But it depends by the situation.
Again, there's a question in both shitot. According to the Chachamim, it was not mevushal kol tzarko. According to Chananya, it was not mevushal kidei ma'achal ben drusai. But either way, it was something that be'etzem requires gufa ktuma, and he forgot.
Yeah.
Okay. So they asked Rechiya bar Abba this question. And what happened was, ishtik, velo amar lahu velo midi. He was quiet and he didn't respond. Now, why was he? They asked Rechiya bar Abba, and he was quiet. Why he didn't respond?
Was embarrassed?
So it sounds like he didn't know the answer. At that time, maybe he didn't know. No, he didn't know perhaps. He didn't know the answer. The next day, Nafak Darash Lahu, he went out and he expounded, means he taught them the following. He found the halakha and he wanted to teach the following. He said like this, there's a Mishnah in Masechet Trumot that says, now this is by Bishul, this is actual Bishul on Shabbat. It says, HaMivashel b'Shabbat, if somebody cooks on Shabbat, now we're not talking about shehiya, we're talking about he goes, turns on the oven, puts on his steaks and starts cooking on Shabbat. Bishogeg yochal, if it's Bishogeg means it was my mistake. He forgot it was Shabbat, he didn't realize it was a Sur Melacha, but Bishogeg, B'kitzu, yochal, he could eat it. Now, there is a machloket elsewhere. Who could eat it? Could he eat it now? Could he eat it after Shabbat? And we're not going to get into that right now. Kedei she'asu, we're not going to get into that. But b'kitzu, b'shogeg, he could eat it. B'mezid, if he cooked on Shabbat, b'mezid intentionally, which is asur, obviously, lo yochal is not allowed to eat it. Now this is bishul, mivashel b'Shabbat, Mishnah Trumot says like that.
So
what?
So if you forgot, you are allowed to eat.
Yochal, he could eat it. B'mezid, lo yochal. Reb Chia bar Abba finished off this and he said, his own words, he said, Veloshna. Now what's Veloshna? Literally it means there's no difference. So Rashi learns, what did Reb Chia bar Abba mean? He meant, when it comes to shehiya, like the case we asked, there's no difference between shogeg and mezid.
Lama.
Evantem?
Lama.
A big difference.
Because there's no difference
Shabbat.
between shogeg and mezid. Now there's two ways There's two ways to understand that. Either that means in both cases it's asur, or it means in both cases it's
Mutar. Both cases mutar.
Hold on. That's going to be a machloket in a minute. But Rabbi Chia bar Abba said something very unclear.
It's different, not the
One
same.
second. What did he say? He said, we know there's a Mishnah in Masechet Trumot that says, HaMivashel b'Shabbat b'shogeg yochal b'mezid lo yochal. And then he finished off and he said, Veloshna. Now Veloshna means, אבל לגבי השאלה שלנו of shehiya b'shogeg, sheshachach, there's no, אין חילוק בין בשוגג בין במזיד. ועכשיו, what does he mean to say? Does he mean to say that even mezid is mutar? Or does he mean to say, afilu b'shogeg, it's asur to eat it?
No.
So there's machloket. Let's see. My veloshna. Says the Gemara, what did Rabbi Chia bar Abba mean when he said veloshna? So Rabba of Rav Yosef, the Amoraim were arguing what Rabbi Chia bar Abba meant what he said. So Rabba of Rav Yosef, Tarmi tarvayu le'tera. Rabba of Rav Yosef said that what Rabbi Chia bar Abba meant to say was, it's to the side of heter, which means even b'mezid, if he forgot, means he put it on the fire erev Shabbat, and b'mezid, it was intentionally went into Shabbat. One second, yochal, it's permitted to be eaten. Mivashet, so what's the difference then? What is the difference between bishul and shehiya? What's the obvious difference, Fevra? What's the difference?
Eating melacha on Shabbos.
Okay,
מבעוד
yom, it's true, but shehiya is an isur.
כן, אבל האיסור של שהייה, לזה, זה גזירה שחכמים עשו שמא יחכה.
It's true.
פה הוא בישל עשה מלאכה בשבת.
Beautiful. So the Gemara says a little more even. The Gemara says like this.
But there is no difference with the cooking, but the mezid, the person cannot eat it in Shabbat.
That's a discussion. That's a discussion. Veloshna is going back on shehiya in our question.
There is no difference in the cooking, but there is a difference between when they can eat it or what is the situation. Let's not
get into all the details. The point is, if it's mutar, it's asur. In terms of bishul, we're saying there's a chiluk shogeg umezid, and Rabbi Chia bar Abba said in terms of shehiya, there's no chiluk. What does it mean there's no chiluk? So Rav of Rav Yosef come and they say it means there's no chiluk, it's mutar either way.
Yeah.
Why? Let's see. So he says like this, because mevashel hu dika avid maaseh. In the case of bishul, he did an action. He went on Shabbat, he did a physical action, which is asur. So therefore, we're going to say b'mezid lo yochal, he can't eat it. Avalai, but in shehiya deloka avid maaseh b'mezid. He didn't do an action. What's the pshat? He didn't do an action. When Shabbat came, he didn't do an isur. What did he do? He just didn't take it off the fire before Shabbat like he was supposed to. That's not doing an action. Maaseh biyadayim. He didn't do an action. So memela, you could argue then, nami yochal, even mezid, it would be mutar for him to eat. As opposed to bishul, which is a maaseh, he did on Shabbat. Here he didn't do a maaseh. He did lack of an action. He didn't do the action he was supposed to.
There's no problem of melechet machshevet here?
One second. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar, Nachman Yitzchak says the opposite. He says, what's Rav Chia bar Abba saying? Le'isura. He says, actually, what Rabbi Chia bar Abba meant to say, lo shna, is the opposite. It's for isur. It means, even b'shogeg, it's going to be asur to eat that on Shabbat. Why? So he says a very interesting logic. There are times we find this idea that the Chachamim put more of a chumrah on their words than even the din deoraita.
Even
Chachamim samu more of a chumrah on their words, even more than isurei deoraita.
Okay.
Why? Mevashel hu de lo atil iarume. Because as we're going to see later, mevashel, where people take isurei deoraita very seriously. So therefore, if it comes to bishul, he's not gonna. Iarume means he's not gonna try to be trickery. He's not going to try to be deceitful. Because people know if it's an isur deoraita, they're scared of that. They stay away from that. So he's not gonna cook b'mezid and say it was b'shogeg. He's not gonna go that far. So therefore, b'shogeg yochal. We say b'shogeg, he could still eat it. But in the case of shehiya, that in the case of shehiya, people don't take Isurei Darabanan as seriously, so he might trick us. What do you mean? He might really do the shehiya Erev Shabbat b'mezid, and then he's going to say, no, it wasn't b'mezid. Really, it was b'shogeg. So therefore, but he'll say it was b'shogeg. So therefore, b'shogeg nami lo yochal, we're going to say even b'shogeg that he cannot eat it, which is essentially a gzera. So what does it mean? So what comes
there is no difference.
We have the following machloket within the words of Rabbi Chiya bar Abba. Let's put this down. The saying is like this. The question that was asked to Rabbi Chiya bar Abba was, if he put it on the fire before Shabbat, he didn't do gufa u'ktumah like he was supposed to, and then he left it on into Shabbat. He forgot. Okay? So what's the halacha? So Rabbi Chiya bar Abba said that even though in terms of bishul, on Shabbat, there's a chiluk, in terms of shehiya, before Shabbat, there's no chiluk. So we said, Rabbi Chiya bar Abba says, for shehiya, ein chiluk, lo shna. Ein chiluk. Fine. So now we have a machloket amoraim. What does Rabbi Chiya bar Abba mean when he says there's no chiluk? We have Rabba v'Rav Yosef. They say,
shogeg mutar mezid asur.
For heter. And we have Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, who says Isu. So what does it mean? Heter means afilu mezid is mutar, and Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says Isu afilu
shogeg
b'shogeg.
איך אבל אפילו מזיד מותר?
I'll explain. What's the logic in this argument?
במזיד לשהייה, לא לבישול.
לשהייה, exactly.
לשהייה.
By bishul we know that there's a chiluk, but by shehiya there's no chiluk. So what's the no chiluk? So Rabba v'Rav Yosef say, shehiya means
shehiya הוא שם את זה על הגז מלפני שבת.
על הפייל.
של הגחלים.
ולא כיסת הגחלים, השאיר אותם, אסור לו. אם נכנס שם הוא צריך לכסות את הגחלים לפני שבת. כשדובר על מאכל שהוא לא...
Now we go back to Chananya and all of this thing, if it's not fully cooked
so
or...
like this, Rabba v'Rav Yosef say it's mutar, they say like this, because when it comes to Shabbat, Bishul, which he did a maaseh b'yadayim, he turned on the stove on Shabbat, he started frying up steaks. There we're going to say b'mezid asur b'shogeg mutar. That's more asur, it's more problematic. Here, it's not that he did a maaseh b'yadayim. What he did was he put food on the stove before Shabbat. Now, what he should have done was taken it off the fire before Shabbat began, or added gufa u'ktumah. He had to have done something. Now Shabbat came. It wasn't a maaseh b'yadayim. He just didn't do something. It's a lack of action. So there, we're going to say even mezid you could eat it after the fact, no problem. That's the shita of Rabba v'Rav Yosef. Even mezid is going to be mutar.
Again, if it the mezid, I didn't.
The point is, there's a difference between if you do an isur b'yadayim versus you don't prevent the isur from happening.
If you're doing this,
understand? אנחנו יכולים לעשות חילוק, אם עשית איסור בידיים, כאילו עשית פרואקטיב איסור, או שלא עשית משהו למנוע מהאיסור. אז כאן, שמת את האוכל על הגבי האש לפני שבת. מה היה לך לעשות? באמת, אתה צריך להסיר את זה מהאש לפני שבת. לא עשית את זה, אבל זו איסור בידיים בשבת. אז says Rabba v'Rav Yosef, in such a case, even b'mezid it's going to be mutar to eat that food. Okay?
Even b'mezid would be mutar to eat it. Okay.
And Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says...
So you want to tell me that the person knows from lechatchila that he's going to leave it on the fire and he's going to enter to Shabbat, then just because I didn't do the action by myself.
Exactly, because there is such a chiluk.
But there is an issue here with garuf vekatum.
Exactly, it's a gzera derabanan that he should have done. You're right, it's a gzera derabanan, but he didn't do.
But how they allow it?
Who?
Rabba Rav Yosef.
Because again, he didn't fulfill the gzera derabanan.
And they don't say the situation with the food if it's like ben rosai or according to Chachamim.
That's the question. The question is in the case that he needed gufa or ketuma. It depends between Chananya and Chachamim. But let's just not focus so much on that. The point is, it's not even a question. You needed gufa or ketuma, he didn't do it. But since he didn't do masa biyadayim, mezid is mutar. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, no, that's not what Yechiya bar Abba meant. Yechiya bar Abba meant ein chiluk by shehiya is actually the asor. He meant that even b'shogeg it's going to be asur. Why? What's the logic in that? Because we know people, they take Yisurei D'Oraita very strict.
So it's Gzera.
So 1 second. So therefore, if they cook on Shabbat b'mezid, they're not going to say, pretend as if it was b'shogeg. You don't do Yisurei D'Oraita. And you're not going to trick and cook on Shabbat and say it was b'shogeg. But shehiya is Yisur D'Rabanan. People don't take Yisurei D'Rabanan so seriously. Memela, what could happen is, he could put it on the fire Erev Shabbat b'mezid, and then when it hits Shabbat, he'll say, it wasn't mezid, it was really b'shogeg. But it's not true. There's more of a concern that he's going to make a trick, and therefore even b'shogeg, they made an extra gzera to strengthen their words. The Chachamim's words will be asur. Okay, let's go ahead. Says the Gemara, meitevei. So the Gemara here quotes a braita, which really is going to be a kasha on Rabba of Rav Yosef. You don't like their shita, I can tell. It's going to be a kasha on their shita, exactly. That's what we're going to see. So the Gemara says like this, just to be clear
because
for a second.
It's basically decline everything that you spoke.
No, it doesn't.
Lama lo?
Again, even if there's a gzera derabanan, we're talking about after the fact, can you eat it or not?
It all depends by the situation with the food. How? If זה מבושל, according to Chachamim, אם זה ben rosai.
No, Matan. If somebody did Yisur D'Rabanan, he didn't do the shehiya properly with gufa ketuma. The question here is, can you eat the food on Shabbat?
Talui.
Again, when you're doing Yisur D'Oraita, so we know that there's this distinction between shogeg and mezid.
But there is no הבדל בין Chachamim לדאורייתא, the chumrah.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, but that's the machloket essentially, right? Meitevei, says the Gemara, a question from a Braita. The Braita says as follows. Shachach ktera gabe kira. Okay, a person put a pot on the stovetop, Erev Shabbat, and he forgot it. Okay, there was no gufa ketuma, he forgot the food, or bishla b'Shabbat, and then it went into Shabbat, and it was continuing to cook. Says the Braita, b'shogeg yochal, if it was b'shogeg, he could eat it. Exactly. Okay. He forgot to take it off. B'shogeg, he could eat it. B'mezid, but if he intended for it to go into Shabbat without gufa ketuma, lo yochal. He's not allowed to eat it. Okay? Ba'med, now, already, right there, that's not like what Rabbi Yechiya bar Abba is saying. You understand? Rabbi Yechiya bar Abba is saying that ein chiluk, there's no difference between shogeg and mezid.
No, there is.
The Braita clearly says there is the chiluk like regular bishul. So we're going to have to explain this. When is this true? Now this is the Braita continues. Rabbi Meir's shita. We'll get more into that tomorrow. I think we're going to run out of time. But meaning if it was food that required grufa ketuma. You understand? It wasn't fully heated water or it wasn't fully cooked food, so it needed gufa ketuma. But if it was water that was completely heated, or food that was completely cooked, Rabbi Meir says, since that does not require grufa ketuma, kanireh, we'll see in the Gemara exactly what the pshat is in this tomorrow, but if it was completely cooked, like the Chachamim, ben b'shogeg, ben b'mezid, yochali could eat it on Shabbat, divrei Rabbi Meir. That's the shita of Rabbi Meir. So where it was food that needed gufa ketuma, be'etzem, b'shogeg yochal, b'mezid lo yochal. But if it was fully cooked, says Rabbi Meir, either the water was fully heated, the food was fully cooked, before Shabbat, you left it on without gufa ketuma, it would be mutar to eat that on Shabbat. Rabbi Yehuda is more machmir. He says like this: Chamin shu chamu kol tzokan mutarin. That it's only if the water was fully heated which we know is considered metztamek v'ralo. So then it would be mutar mipnei shemetztamek v'ralo, because as it continues to boil, it dissipates, it evaporates. So that you'd be allowed to eat on Shabbat. But v'tavshil shebishel kol tzorko asur. A dish that continues to cook that you forgot on the stovetop, that would be asur. Mipnei shemetztamek v'yafelo, v'chol ha'metztamek v'yafelo kegon. Other things that are also metztamek v'yafelo, kegon, for example, kruv. Kruv is cabbage. Upulin is beans. Ubasar taruf. Taruf means mincemeat. As opposed to big pieces of meat where it cooks, it continues to get better. But ubasar taruf, it's mincemeat. Slicha, if it cooks it, mincemeat, it gets better. Slicha. Asur, those would be asur because metztamek v'yafelo. Metztamek v'ralo mutar, but if it's metztamek v'ralo, it would be mutar. Okay, that's the Braita. Now, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda's shitot, we're going to have to focus more on tomorrow, unless we'll see if we have time. But the bottom line is, what do you see from the beginning of the Braita? It says, if you put a pot on the stove and you forgot to take it off before Shabbat, b'shogeg yochal, b'mezid lo yochal. So the Gemara says, wait a second. Automatically, we have a contradiction. Because we have Rabbi Chiya bar Abba that says, shehiya, there's no difference between shogeg and mezid. On the other hand, we have a Braita that says that
Yesh chiluk, mezid, shogeg.
Yesh chiluk. So let's see. How would we answer according to Rav of Rav Yosef, and how will we answer according to Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak? Let's try to use our brains for a second to figure this out. Be'etzem, we have a stira. The same case, you left the food on the stove top and it needed gufa uktuma. Whether you forgot b'shogeg or b'mezid, the Braita says, if it was b'shogeg, it's mutar to eat it, b'mezid, you're not allowed to eat it. The problem is, Rabbi Chiya bar Abba gave us a psak that said, there is no chiluk. So let's start with Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. If you go with Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, the Gemara is going to say, it's not a problem. And I'll explain why. Because there was a time, kodem agzera, and there was a time, achrei agzera. Meaning originally we said, like Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, like the Braita, which is, originally we said, b'shogeg yochal, b'mezid lo yochal. But then the Chachamim saw that people were taking this Gzeirah Darabanan lightly. And what they ended up doing was, they did shehiya b'mezid lifnei Shabbat, and then they said, no, it was really b'shogeg. So came along the Rabbanan, and they said, even b'shogeg we're going to aser. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak in Rabbi Chiya bar Abba works very well to answer the stira.
Yes. So this Braita said after, when people start to make it and start to play games.
No, the opposite. The opposite. The Braita is before.
The Braita is before.
That b'shogeg would be mutar, and Rav Chiya bar Abba is talking about after the Gezerah. That works out very nicely.
I don't understand. In the beginning we said Rabbi Chiya bar Abba, I said אין חילוק. רבא ורב יוסף אומר ליתר, שאפילו מזיד מותר לאכול. לפי רבי יצחק, אסור אפילו בשוגג. אז לא הבנתי, הברייתא הזאת באה להראות לנו שמה, שיש חילוק בין שוגג ומזיד. במניח את הגדרה בפור שבת, בלי לקטום ולזה, במקרה שצריך. אז מה, לא הבנתי.
So like this, now it's a stira. Rav Chiya bar Abba says no chiluk. The Braita says there is a chiluk. So the fear of Nachman bar Yitzchak, we don't have a problem because we could say that the Braita that says there's a chiluk was before the Gezerah. Meaning before they said even b'shogeg is going to be asur, so they said b'shogeg mutar. That's the Braita. But Rav Chiya bar Abba says ein chiluk means that even b'shogeg is asur. The way Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak explained, that's after the Chachamim reinforced their words. So that works out nicely. But according to Rav of Rav Yosef, how are we going to explain this stira? How did they understand Rav Chiya bar Abba that both shogeg and mezid is mutar?
So
that doesn't work out because he's saying Lefi that Rav of Rav Yosef.
So they are before the Gzera.
But even b'mezid is mutar. There was no such a case like that.
Maybe if you don't have nothing else to eat.
You understand the problem here? Means we're showing from the Braita that b'mezid should at least be.
No, but maybe the mezid that we speak about, like he did an action with his hands. Okay, he put it in. For shehiya?
Yeah, but that's not that. The shehiya by definition is not biyadayim. By definition. Biyadayim means you went and proactively did an issur. If you put it on the fire on Shabbat, that's an issur.
So maybe the mevashel himself not going to eat, but someone else that is cooked for it.
No, but the point, I hear, but the point is that Rav of Rav Yosef become difficult in their hezber of Rav Chiya bar Abba based on this stira. Let's read that inside now.
So maybe it's for an item that's metztamek v'ralo?
Let's see. Katani Mia, says the Gemara, but the Braita says in the beginning, Tavshil shelo bishel kol tzorko. It says if it was a dish that wasn't fully cooked, it needed gufa or ktuma. We said bishogeg, it's mutar. So bishlam of Nachman bar Yitzchak, I understand Nachman bar Yitzchak lo kasha. Kan kodem gzera. Before the gzera, that was what the Braita was talking about. Bishogeg would be mutar because ve'etzem it should be like Shabbat, like bishul at least, and therefore bishogeg would be mutar. Kan Yechiya bar Abba, the way the Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak explained, la'achar gzera. It was after the gzera. They saw that people were playing games, and therefore they said even bishogeg would be asur. El Rabba v'Rav Yosef but according to Rabba Rav Yosef who explained in Yechiya bar Abba that there's no chiluk means even b'shogeg, even b'mezid is mutar. So what's going on here? I kodem gzera. If you want to tell me that they're both mutar before the gzera, that's when Yechiya bar Abba was talking kashya mezid. The problem is that doesn't work. Yechiya bar Abba couldn't be talking before the gzera because b'mezid it was still asur, and the fee them before the gzera even it would be mutar. That doesn't work. And if Rabba and Rav Yosef say Rabbi Yechiya bar Abba was talking after the gzera, so kashinami shogeg. So even the shogeg is going to be a problem because the way they're saying it, achar gzera, shogeg would be, shogeg would be mutar, and if Rabbi Yechiya bar Abba was talking, one second, slicha. If it was after the gzera, kashena mishogeg, because after the gzera, the Yisur was both shogeg and mezid. So it comes out that their shita of Rabbi Yechiya bar Abba wouldn't be before the gzera, wouldn't be after the gzera, and therefore the Gemara says kasha. Rabbi Rav Yosef shita is indeed difficult, and it doesn't answer this question. What's that?
B'shogeg is okay. According
to Rabba Rav Yosef, Rabbi Yechiya bar Abba means to say that there's no chiluk. It means whether it's shogeg or mezid, it's mutar. Okay. When is he talking? If he's talking before the gzera, b'mezid is asur. So that doesn't work.
למה?
במזיד.
להשעות?
ודאי.
לפני הגזרה?
אבל איך יש שכחה במזיד?
One second.
הוא שכח.
He didn't take it off בכוונה.
מזיד, בכוונה.
כן.
אבל שכחה,
yeah.
זה לא, אין פה כוונה
בשכחה, he put it on before and he intentionally didn't take it off. בכוונה,
לא שכח.
He didn't take it off.
אז הוא לא שכח, הוא כן שכח.
Right.
אתה אומר שכח, ושכח גדרה על גבי קירה.
You're right.
אם הוא שכח,
You're right.
אין לו כוונה.
No, in the case of Mezid, you have to say is he put it on intentionally, exactly, to leave it on for Shabbat, exactly.
אז איך יש פה מזיד?
Yeah, no, I hear. One second, before you. So what's the point over here? What's the point? Comes out like this. Rabba and Rav Yosef don't fit to resolve this answer, this kasha. Why? Again, because Rabba and Rav Yosef, they say the pshat in Rabbi Yechiya bar Abba is ben b'shogeg, ben b'mezid is mutar. Now, when did Rabbi Yechiya bar Abba say that? Before the gzera, at least b'mezid was asur.
Before the gzera,
at least b'mezid was asur.
למה? אבל הגזרה זה...
We're going to see...
חיזקו את זה ש...
The Braita is saying that there's a chiluk...
למה עשו את הגזרה? כי ראש אנשים מכירים.
עושים איזה צחוק.
עושים ראש קטן.
The Braita, which is the gzera, added, even b'shogeg is going to be asur. אבל קודם הגזרה, במזיד היה אסור. ודאי.
אבל הוא אומר אין חילוק.
So according to Rabbi Rav Yosef, the heter that they're both mutar b'mezid, it can't be that he was talking
before. Rabbi Yechiya is tana, right?
One second. According to Yechiya bar Abba, before the gzera, they can't be talking. According to Rabbi Rav Yosef, Rabbi Yechiya bar Abba couldn't be talking before the gzera because then why b'mezid would have been mutar? We know before the gzera at least b'mezid was asur at least. And Rabbi Yechiya bar Abba couldn't be talking after the gzera because according to Rabbi Rav Yosef, who say that Rabbi Yechiya bar Abba is saying both are mutar, after the gzera both are asur. So it comes out that the way Rabbi Rav Yosef explained Rabbi Yechiya bar Abba, it doesn't work any time in history. And therefore their shita is refuted.
אני לא מבין, הגזרה שאחר הגזרה זה אומר שאסור restriction
אפילו בשוגג. אפילו לאסור בשוגג.
אפילו לאסור בשוגג.
אבל לפני זה, במזין היה אסור.
אפילו לאסור בשוגג?
כן. זה הגזרה. We'll speak about it tomorrow because we're running out of time. But the point is,
שברנו את הראש שעה,
so it doesn't work.
אז הגזרה...
Rabbi Rav Yosef don't work.
עד לפני הגזרה היה מותר בשוגג?
זה לא היה הגיוני, נו מה.
אין בעיה. ואסור במזיד? אבל לפי מה שהוא אומר אין חילוק, גם במזיד גם...
doesn't work.
לא.
רבא בר יוסף מסביר.
So Nachman bar Yitzchak works out beautiful. What Nachman bar Yitzchak says is that the Braita which says there's a chiluk was before the gzera. Chiya bar Abu says there's no chiluk was after the gzeira. It works out beautiful. But Rabbi Rav Yosef will explain that Chiya bar Abba is saying in chiluk le'atera, there's no allowance, there's no time in history that it was mutar ben b'shogeg ben b'mezid, and that's why the Gemara Taka says kasha. Kasha.
אבל זה עובד טוב לגבי לרבי
Rabbi Yosef works out well, so he's accepted.
כן, כי הוא אומר אין חילוק.
אסור אפילו בשוגג, שזה אחר הגזרה. לפני הגזרה, מה שאמר רבי, זה שאין חילוק ברייתא.
כן, יש חילוק.
יש חילוק.
כן.
אבל לגבי רבי ובר יוסף זה לא עובד בשום מצב, לא לפי הברייתא, לא עובד...
לא, אם לא הייתה גזרה זה היה עובד.
למה?
Before the גזרה was working perfectly. אם לא הייתה גזרה לפי רבי יוסף זה עובד, אוקיי.
We know there was a gzera, forget about that. We know there was a gzera, that doesn't work. So therefore, Rabbi Rav Yosef's explanation, Chiya bar Abba, is not.
אבל אתה אומר דרש לו, נכון, המבשל בשבת בשוגג יאכל, נגזיד לא יאכל.
Exactly. So we don't know if he meant לאסור or להתיר. The way we're coming out is, it must be he meant לאסור.
למה לחומרה? אבל הוא אומר, בשוגג יאכל ומזיד לא יאכל.
Exactly, but he doesn't work with history. Memela, we knocked at Rabbi Rav Yosef Shita.
No, I'm not talking about Rabbi Bar Yosef. I'm talking about Rabbi Chiya bar Abba. In the beginning, right? המבשל בשבת בשוגג, דרש לו, נכון?
Okay, but let's just do, Mamish, I want to do a little bit more, just to finish up this point, really. So the Gemara says, "My gezerta." What was the gezerah we're talking about here? The Amar Rav Yehuda bar Shmuel, Amar Rav Abba, Amar Rav Kahana, Amar Rav. But Tchila Yomrim, originally the halacha was hamivashel b'Shabbat. If you cook on Shabbat, meaning you mamash cook, yisur do'aita, b'shogeg yochal, mizid lo yochal. That was the original halacha. And they assumed it would be the same thing for shehiya. Means if he put it on before, he left it on Shabbat. There's a chiluk between shogeg and mezid. But misherabu mashehin b'mezid ve'omrim shchechim anu. Many people increased that they put it on b'mezid and they pretended like it was b'shogeg. So the Chachamim saw they needed to reinforce their words. Chazu v'kansu ala shocheach. So they made a knas. Even if it was only b'shogeg, it's still going to be asur. Now this works beautiful in Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak's words. Unfortunately, Rabbi Rav Yosef, it doesn't make sense. We're going to stop here. Kashya de Rabbi Meir de Rabbi Meir. It's towards the bottom of Lamchet Hashem. We'll pick up tomorrow.